Welcome to the Sober Heathen podcast. I am the Sober Heathen, and thanks again, Lonnie, for that great intro music, man. It pumps me up every time I'm down. I'm a little slow getting into things. I hear that music, and man, I can just listen to it on repeat. So thank you so much, my friend Lonnie, for making that for the podcast. So today I'm with Coach O'Connor. We're going to talk about his recovery, talk a little bit about the family dynamics. I think is where he kind of wants to drive this thing. So, Coach, welcome to the podcast, man. How are you?
Pleasure. That is a great intro.
Yeah, dude.
He's pumped up.
Yeah, he's like, I had my old one, and he's like, do you mind if I mess with it a little bit? And then he sent it to me, and I was like, holy crap. And
yeah.
That's him on the guitar, man. He's shredding.
That's awesome. Yeah, so I basically wanted to pick it up, let you know that I grew up in an alcoholic home, and I really didn't know that my dad had a drinking problem until he was, waking up with nasty words written on his forehead, like the word bastard backwards so he could read it in the mirror. My mom would sketch that on there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so she was fighting back against his drinking ferociously. So I always thought my mom was the bad guy. I thought my mom's crazy. I didn't know my dad. When you're a little kid, you don't know, that your dad can get in trouble from drinking or have a bad life. But I started early on in kindergarten. I was a pretty well-nurtured kid. Things were relatively normal at home. And then I remember I started first grade, and it was like my dad wasn't at the breakfast table. He was sick a lot, and my mom's rushing me out the door for first grade. And I'm like, this is crazy. I mean, I like kindergarten because it was a half a day. This is really high pressure now in the first grade until show and tell. Then I always loved getting up in front of groups and talking. So at show and tell, I was going to show this nickel that my grandpa gave me, and a kid next to me wanted to check it out, and he had checked everything out the first week of first grade, and I showed him the nickel, and he ends up swallowing it. Typical first grade. It was a buffalo nickel, probably worth a fortune today. Of course, I didn't want it back after he swallowed it. But it's like, so this kid takes this nickel, and I punch him. So the teacher runs over. She's like, what's your problem? First you're bringing spoons to school like it's kindergarten, and you don't have pencils, and now you're fighting. I'm like, man, this is terrible. First grade was terrible. I'm walking home, and I look in the back of the station wagon, and my bike's in the back of the station wagon. And I said to my dad, I said, what's going on? He goes, well, we're moving, son. I'm like, you couldn't have gave me a couple days notice? I'm 6 years old, and I know that's not normal. You don't just move.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, I got a nickel. I got a problem at school I'm trying to solve. And he's like, we're going to get a fresh start. So the fresh start, I started in a new school. We moved out of Detroit into Redford, and we lived right on the street that the school lives on. And my dad falls asleep on the porch in his underwear, and the kids are walking by from the new school laughing at this guy. And he's 300 pounds, bikini briefs.
Oh, boy.
So not the most sexy picture for starting a new school. And I'm like, Dad, wake up. You're embarrassing me. And he's like, I was watching the sun come up and I fell asleep out here. Yeah, right next to that can of Budweiser. The kids at school said, hey, we seen your dad. I said, shut up, man. We're not going to talk about my dad. So I started getting into defending, hiding the disease, basically. Sure. And I know that's another topic for probably another day, but thinking about it as a disease concept, I was hiding it, and I was kind of like taking the role on as a parent. I was trying to cover for my dad and get the kids up for school. I'm a middle kid, so I was getting my older brother up and my younger brother up. Long story short, Mom's writing on his forehead. She literally, I said, because she was sleeping on the couch and I wanted to get my parents back together. I still didn't realize the alcohol was the problem. I just thought my mom was nuts. So I said, can I have some friends spend the night? My mom says, why would you want to have people over here? I'm like, I just want to do it this one time. So my buddy spent the night, and my mom's off the couch, and my dad passes out and he's snoring. Well, I know she didn't get no sleep because we couldn't get no sleep. And the next day, he's walking to the restroom and he's just got the band of his pajamas on, but no pajamas. He passed out and my mom cut his shorts off. She sticks him to the mattress with the pair of scissors, and she wrote a note on the sheets telling him where to go and how to get there. Long story short, he slept the ink off. This guy is in the depths of addiction. He's got 3 kids, and his wife is going crazy. She comes up with this great idea of the silent treatment. So we did that for like 3 years. One day I had to break the silence though, because he came in and he says, Judy, this is my mom's name. He says, Judy, did you hear about that wife who poured hot wax in her husband's ear? I'm like, Dad, come here. I had to break the silence. I was like, what are you doing, man? I said, we have candles. He's so burnt out. He's like, oh yeah. I mean, she's writing on your body. She's sticking your shorts to the, it's just crazy stuff. So long story short, I was totally straight-laced athlete, into the martial arts, into baseball and wrestling. My older brother comes up the driveway with 2 cases of beer. I'm like 11. And I ran out there, and he's got a key to this back of this Mustang, and he's got safes in there. He's dealing weed. And I go, Mike, I thought we said we'd never be like Dad. He said, Tom, pot and beer is not going to hurt you. So at 11, the guy that showed me how to ride a bike, do times tables, play baseball is telling me pot and beer won't hurt me.
Yeah.
I started using it at 11. And then it was off to the races, because we had and my younger brothers following me. We learned from our older brothers and sisters. We teach our younger brothers and sisters, and now my younger brother's following after me at 10. So we got it. We got a messed up family. Mom stops fighting. She starts being self-abusive. She burns holes in her arm when he comes up to fight with her. She's like, don't hurt me, I'll hurt myself. And she starts burning holes in her arm. And I'm thinking, maybe Mom's not the bad guy here. And then something really strange happened, and she started getting help. She actually started going to Al-Anon. So she started learning how to deal with his craziness. He would come home, and what normally happened, she would be reading these paperback books, like, those romance novels. He'd throw it across the room. She'd throw hot coffee in his face, and it was off to the races all night long. This time, after she started going to Al-Anon, he comes home, he throws the book out of her hand. She grabs another book. She had a whole big box of books. Next thing I know, he's going through all the books, and after he threw every one of them out of her hand, she says, now what, Tom? His name was Tom, too. She says, I'm not going to fight with you. We're talking about genetics. I just want to say this, that my dad woke me up one time, and he said, hey, that note you left me on the table really hit home with me, son. I said, I didn't leave you any note, Dad. He said, yeah, you did. It's right here. And I went out there on the kitchen table. There was a note, an old note, and said, Dad, things would be a lot better around here if you didn't drink. Love, Tom. I said, I didn't write that note, Dad. So he wakes my mom up on the couch, and she's like, what are you doing forging my kids' names on these notes? She said, you wrote that to your dad.
Ooh.
Yeah. My grandma gave it to my mom. And it's like, this is an insidious, way of life, because it's more dangerous than you think. And now you've got 3 kids all showing signs of addiction. My brother's car's in the middle of the football field. My younger brother's getting addicted to prescription drugs. I'm dealing, dope in the Detroit area with some of the major players, and things are crazy. I mean, things are really, really crazy. She goes to Al-Anon. She starts getting help. I start getting real sick, real addicted to a lot of the street drugs, the mescaline, acid, cocaine, alcohol, marijuana. I was probably smoking a quarter pound a week. This was when it was illegal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then long story short, they kicked me out. My dad, it's Memorial Day, 1976. No one's talked to him in years. He comes into the kitchen, and I think I had just got my brown or black belt, and I'm like, hey, we don't want you touching Ma no more. And my ma steps between us, and she breaks the fight up. She goes, I don't want any fighting today. I'm like, what do you mean? That's all we do.
Right.
She's like, I don't want you fighting today. And she looks at my dad and she says, would you like to try a barbecue? My family's so screwed up, we have to try things. We never pull one off, but we're going to try it. So he says, Judy, I'll crawl across the hot coals if I could feel a part of the family for one day. I said, good line, Dad. I still wanted to fight him. And he says, stick around, mister. We're having a barbecue. Long story short, we had one. And he took us to the Dairy Queen afterwards. Then he says, after the Dairy Queen, he goes, we're out of milk. I said, we don't need milk, Dad. This was a day I dreamed about since kindergarten. No day, one day without alcohol.
Yeah.
I said, we don't need milk because milk out of milk at my house, man, he's going in for liquor or booze. He's not getting milk. And he comes out, he goes in, he stops at the party store and he comes out and he's got no milk. He's got a bag under his arm. And I'm like, you rotten SOB, you're going to ruin this beautiful day. And my mom and I bang heads. I'm in the back seat and I can still feel it right here. We banged heads looking in this bag and it was Twinkies and a little pint of half and half. That was his milk.
Oh.
He took it. Yeah, no chaser. He's like thick half and half. It's like, okay, that's better than alcohol.
Yeah.
It was several days later. I was still very much in the street vending business, and my mom's. It was hard enough having one parent with their act together. Now all of a sudden, my dad's coming home. He's not drinking. He says to my mom, "Would you make me some iced tea?" I was like, "Oh, my dad had a nervous breakdown. He hates people who drink iced tea. Hates them. He's going to have a glass." He got home that day, was a gallon made. And ever since, for the rest of his life, there was a gallon of iced tea in that house. He's sitting on the bed at 9:30 at night because he only worked a half hour from work. And, I mean, we only lived a half hour from his work. He's actually home by 9:30 at night because he got off at 9. And he's sitting on the bed. My mom's cleaning up after him. She's got the floor in his bedroom. You can see it. She's bringing socks and underwear in. I'm like, wow. I said, what are you doing? Why are you cleaning up after him? I said, what about the hell he put us through? She says, Tommy, he's not drinking. And she puts this stuff, she goes to put the socks and underwear in his drawer. And she nudges this AA book. And she pulls out the AA book. She goes, you've been going to this AA? He goes, yeah, for 3 days. She goes, I've been going to Al-Anon for 6 months. He goes, I wondered why you stopped burning holes in your arm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So long story short, that was the beginning of their recovery. Memorial Day, 1976. I was off to the races in the middle of a drug syndicate, and a whole lot of other things went wrong. I won't bore you with the details. It was just mainly a drunkalogue that lasted 5 years. But I will say that the turning point was my younger brother did 10 milligram Valiums, not to overdose, but just to catch a buzz.
Oh.
We did obnoxious things in my house, and this poor kid is dying in front of my eyes. I was not sober at the time, and I said, you better sober up. My dad was a volunteer at Milan Prison, and he was coming home. He just had talked out there, and he's coming home. I said, you better sober up. Dad's on his way home. And he didn't sober up. He went down, and we had to rush him to the hospital. And they're pounding on his chest, doing all the stuff you got to do to try to save a life back then. And he wiggles his two fingers, and the doctor's like, he's alive. And it's like, he was so sedated. He's addicted to sedative hypnotics, the alcohol, the Valium, all that stuff. And they said to him, you should go for treatment. After he got out of the hospital, we're sitting at the kitchen table, and my mom says, you should go for treatment. They said you're addicted to sedative hypnotics. He says, me? He says, Tom sells the stuff. Oh. He almost dies and blames me. Things got worse. It always gets worse. I don't know if you notice the progression of this illness, but you can tell the people you coach, man, it usually, generally speaking, gets worse.
Sure.
Yeah, so if it's bad in 76, it's worse in 81. I came home. I was in trade school in Detroit, in Grand River in Livernois. It's a pretty rough area, especially in late 70s, early 80s. This was 1980. I was in trade school, still using, still dealing. Dad and mom are doing great. They got friends. They're going all over the country speaking and just doing great. They built intimacy in their relationship, but they got some sick kids. My older brother really didn't have a addiction, but my younger brother was completely addicted, and I was completely addicted. And the the thing got pretty crazy. I came home and my dad had cut a newspaper article out, and he showed me the article. He says, "I want you to go for this job or get out of here." Because after my brother almost died, and a couple more close calls on fights with him, he just had enough of me. And the job said child care worker wanted 2 years of college. I said, Dad, I don't have any college and I don't like kids. He says, I don't care, then get out of here. I said, okay, I'll ride by the place. I rode by this children's home, and it was like a gated community, really enchanting. Kids are playing baseball. I'm thinking, man, I could do this. I could teach kids how to play baseball. I'll ride bikes. I can do that. So I knock on the door, and a nun answers the door. And I had seen the flying nun, singing nun when I was a kid, so I knew how to talk with them, but I'd never really seen one live. And I'm like, whoa. She answers the door. I said, hey, sister, I'm here to apply for this job. And she goes, great. What college did you go to? Right out of the gate, she's grilling me on college. And I'm so burnt out, I don't even know college names. That's how bad I was. I didn't know, Michigan State or Indiana, none of them. So I was like, sister, to tell you the truth, I just have a GED. She's like, oh, you want the maintenance department? I was like, no, I'm going to work with kids. My dad used to work with kids. She's like, is your dad here? I'm like, no. I said, can I at least I said, sister, I think God wants me to work here. Can I at least get a tour? I started conning her right out of the gate. I just wanted a tour. So she's like, yes, a tour won't hurt. We get the tour. She goes, you got any references? I was like, what does that mean? She says, well, anybody say anything good about you? I was like, no. You got me again, sister. She says, like, well, what are you doing now? I said, I'm in trade school in Detroit. She's like, oh, I'll call there and see what they say about you. And I'm scared. Like, this is an inner city trade school. Some of the toughest kids in Wayne County are there. And it was a bad scene. But they did call the trade school, and the trade school gave me a good reference. And I got the job at the children's home. Oh. I said to the trade school, what did you tell this woman? Because I had no idea how I got this job. She said, well, I just told her that before you came here, we had fights every day. And then when you came here, we had no fights.
Oh, well, that's something.
Yeah. So I started working with kids, and I started getting pretty good at it. And in September 4th, 81, although physically, you know how this illness can take you down, and I couldn't hold food down. So I hadn't eaten and kept food down for years, and it was taking its toll. So I could only make it to work a couple days a week, and I thought that was pretty good. So they called me and said, we're going to fire you, because you're not making it to work. I'm like, please give me one more chance. I had a couple of crazy things happen along that with the threat of being fired. And September 4th, 81, I went over and I knocked on the door of my parents because I was living right next door. I said to my mom, I said, I don't want to live like this anymore. She goes, you don't look good. I was like, I don't feel good. She's like, lay on the couch. I'll make you some oatmeal. I woke up to my dad's fist in my face. He says, aren't you supposed to be at work? I'm like, I was just leaving, Dad. And my mom steps between us. She goes, he's thinking about stopping. I never said I wanted to stop. I said, I don't want to live like this anymore. So believe it or not, September 4th, 81 was the last time I had a drink or a drug. And I called my buddy, Rick. I said, Rick, come on over. He says, you going to the game tonight? I said, no, I'm too sick. He came over, but before he did, he says, what's the purpose of the visit? Who else is there? How long do you want me to stay? Because my house wasn't safe. It wasn't a safe place. I couldn't even walk around the block I was still at 19 years old or 20 years old. I was still parking a couple blocks away and hopping fences to get home. So no one knew I was home. So Rick comes over. I give him my dope. I give him my pipes. And long story short, if I called him right now and said, hey, do you remember that day I gave you my dope? He'd go, yep, sure do. You don't remember something happens 43 years ago unless it's really out of the ordinary. Yeah, and it was out of the ordinary for me to give. I did stay at that children's home sober for the next 4 years and learned a lot about kids. I learned a lot about it, and I was getting pretty good at my techniques were catching on. I was in charge of a couple cottages, And then I ended up getting a job offer with a government that wanted me to do what I was doing at the children's home for the government, which was basically prevention work, keeping kids, juvenile delinquency prevention. So, I was dealing with a lot of vandalism, a lot of shoplifting, a lot of alcohol, a lot of drugs. And I did that for 13 years, worked with about 4,000 kids, helped them out quite a bit, and maintained sobriety the whole time. Ended up getting on the speaking circuit because I did. I think you had asked me a question one time. Where did I hear something? One statistic or something. But I got involved with Maple Grove, which is a treatment center in West Bloomfield, and they had a great volunteer program. It was called Maple Grove Community Education. And in 1985, I took their training, and it was 6 months. It was the best addiction education I ever had. But they ask you, if they give you this education, that you'll volunteer for them for 6 months. So I ended up volunteering for them for 20 years.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, and I talked all over Michigan, Ohio, some in Canada, and over 1 million kids. So that was one of the things that I like to do. I like to give back. I like to share the stories, but I like to steer people into a life without substances and healthy habits and things like that. So I want to talk a little bit about recovery and how I maintain that sobriety. And I happened to get sober through Alcoholics Anonymous, even though my drug of choice wasn't alcohol. It was mainly street drugs. But back in '81, there wasn't a lot of clean time in NA, and there was no Celebrate Recovery. There was not a lot of secular programs. But at the time, I didn't believe in a higher power. I thought I was the highest power, to tell you the truth. And I had a lot of come to Jesus meetings at the meetings with people.
Sure.
It was, how it is. I mean, you voice your opinion, and you're going against the grain.
Yeah.
My dad took me to my first meeting when I was 16. I made it 5 minutes. Guy across from me said, "You smell like dope. You don't belong here." And I jumped across the table, grabbed him by the ears. And my dad broke the fight up. He goes, "What happened, Tom?" I was like, he said, "I don't belong here." My dad's like, "I've been trying to get him to come to meetings with me for 2 years. He gets here and you tell him he doesn't belong."
Right.
So I was like, it doesn't go back for 5 years.
Jeez.
That was a lonely 5 years of use, but I did go and I stayed, and I ended up getting, and I think I got the great education at Maple Grove from 80 really 85, 86 on. I had the Alcoholics Anonymous background from 81 to present, and I did a lot with Celebrate Recovery, which is a Christian-based movement. I don't know if you ever heard of that, but that's not just for alcohol. That's for overeating. That's for anything you want
Sure.
to try to conquer. And then something happened. My dad was my key support. I mean, he was a conference-based speaker, so he was going all over. He's a funny guy, and he and I were doing some school talks. He was doing the parent role, and I was doing the kid role, and the groups loved it. In 1984, Tigers won the World Series. Remember that?
I don't remember it. I was 3, but
Oh my goodness, you're
I
such
know
a
the
young
date.
guy. So anyways, he was early in the year. He was cutting out in April and May. He was cutting out articles. He's following them hardcore, and in about towards the end of the year, December, I was at a Piston game. I came home and I heard this coming from my dad's house, and I walked over there. I thought he was building something, but he had a stroke, and he was laying in the hallway, pounding on the wall, trying to get someone's attention. So I came in there. I said, "Dad, what's up?" He goes, "I can't feel my legs. Can you get me into the bed?" I got him into the bed. I called 911, rushed him to the hospital. I'm in the back of the ambulance. I'm 3 years sober. He's like 8 years sober. And I mean, it's just crazy. It was just crazy. Came up to Christmas time, and I went up there, and he said, "Can you tell the family not to come up tonight?" He says, I'm having a test tomorrow. They're going to shoot dye in my veins, and I'm really tired. So I literally blocked the family from going. I was like, he doesn't want us up there tonight. He doesn't want us up there tonight. The next morning, they shot that dye in his veins, and he failed the test and died. December 26th, he passed away. When I was leaving the hospital, he grabbed my hand with his good hand, and he said, "Tom, your health is everything." That was the last thing he said to me. I was like, "Oh, Merry Christmas, Dad. I'll see you tomorrow." And that was the last thing he said to me was, "Your health is everything." And I must have repeated that 1,000 times since then, maybe more, because it's an important, last thing people say is important, and that was my man, and I miss him so much. But long story short, he was a public information guy for AA, and I kept his phone number. He had a great phone number, 255-7777. So when AA called, they're like, "Is Tom there?" I was like, "This is Tom." And they started asking, they say, "Oh, so you want my dad?" I said, "My dad passed away." I said, "But I'm sober. 3 years. I can do it." So I was starting to go to these Teamster UAW meetings and do the public information for AA. So I've really I've been in and around recovery really since 1976, but when I actually got sober was 81. So I'm big on the family dynamics. I'm big on, passing, the power in the 12 steps is this, and it's 5 components. One is membership, a place to belong. 2 is, you get a spiritual base. 3 is like a inventory. You get to look at your good and bad points. 4 is restitution. They literally tell you go make amends. And 5 is you carry the message. So those 5 things really, if you have that in your recovery walk, chances are you'll do really, really well. And for spirituality, if you struggle with higher power, I look at it as support. Who else will pull for you? So if you can't swallow God and you can't swallow Jesus or any of the higher powers, then you can always say, who else? Who else is pulling for me? So build a team of support.
Sure.
But that's it in a nutshell. I mean, I'm still sober today. Very much my priority. Is I know without it, if I was to even pick up today, I would not want to ever be back into that dark pit.
Yeah. Well, that was an amazing story. Thank you for sharing. One question that came across was when you're talking about how we're having a barbecue today, and then things all of a sudden, you had this glimpse of a normal family, and the question is that confusing as a kid when the change happens like that? When a change like that happens, yeah, and you kind of touched on it. How confusing was that when all of a sudden family wants to be family and it's not chaos anymore?
Yeah, it was super confusing because you had 2 people that were at each other's throats now being able to get in the same car, now actually going to meetings and they actually started a couple groups in the Detroit area, and they're going to conferences together. But the hardest part was maybe the first 6 months, because I just didn't know how rooted my dad would become. I knew my mom wasn't going to be living insane again, where she was fighting and throwing stuff at him. And, I didn't have to worry about him burning in his room or butcher knives in the pillow anymore.
Sure.
I had a pretty good pulse that she was going to make it. I wasn't sure he would, because the truth is, my dad was the guy. He had no friends. If he was on fire, people would not even spit. They'd be like, "Don't spit. We don't want to put that out."
Right.
And then I will tell you that he lived it out. He walked the walk and talked the talk, and so that uncertainty went away, and it became a pillar of hope and a pillar of really a solid foundation. I will say that when my dad passed away, his funeral was over 1 mile long. When we were, yeah, we were pulling on to 8 Mile. They were still leaving the church at 7 Mile. I mean, it's like he had no friends, and then all of a sudden, 8 years of helping people, walking the walk, talking the talk. This place was packed. And
I tell you, getting in connection is the opposite of addiction. I truly believe that, and getting into some of these communities, the healthy ones, man, you make lifetime friends. You make family that you never had before.
right.
Yeah, yeah, and so many things right now. Talk about again, and you were probably too young to really appreciate it, but how crazy is that your dad had that letter that was written by himself to his father? How powerful is that? That's incredible.
It was shocking at the time, and the more I think about it now, I do think it was spiritual because
Yeah,
my grandma Rose, she passed away early on, and so I don't know what kind of relationship my mom and her had, but I know she gave her some things, some photos and some things like that, and scrapbook. My mom was a scrapbook person. She would log every one of my dad's talks, log every one of my talks. I mean, she was a scrapbook person, so she had that. And just to realize that he went through what I'm going through.
yeah.
And I had known my grandpa, his dad. I had known my grandpa up until I was maybe, I think he passed away when I was probably 14. So I had known him pretty well. He taught me how to play cribbage and things like that. But I never saw him drunk. He had lost his stomach. He had lost his stomach from drinking. So
Mm,
he
yeah.
took it down the road, but he was sober the whole time I met him.
So there these things, and I agree with you 100% that that's a spiritual experience. That's something that I would absolutely label as a spiritual experience. And I have something kind of similar. But it's not. I didn't write it. I remember sitting in my great grandmother's house. Her and my great grandfather, they raised me, and I never, as a kid, put it together when men would come over and sit with the men, and they'd block the room off, and they'd have a meeting, and then the women would go somewhere else in the house, and they'd have their little meeting. I never understood what that was, even as I was starting to get into AA. And then one day, Miley and I went to visit, and I look over on the wall, and there's this old, I mean, this thing is got to be 50, 60, 70 years old. Serenity Prayer on the wall. And I'd sat there in that same chair and waited for the bus. I just thought it was some religious thing, but it was a Serenity Prayer.
Wow.
And I remember sitting there, I'm like, holy crap, was Grandpa in AA? Were those AA meetings? And and Grandma's like, yeah. And I finally found out, that my great grandfather was an alcoholic for a time.
Wow.
And I know it's embarrassing for some people to talk about this stuff. They don't want their younger family members to think less of them. But holy crap, like I got goosebumps right now just thinking about it. It made Grandpa more human, and to know that he won this battle was such a huge thing for me.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So yeah, it definitely, writing things down and sharing these with your loved ones. You never know what kind of thoughts they're having. It's not for everybody. Not everybody's willing to share and be open like you and I have share on. We put it out into the world. But holy crap, it can be a powerful thing when somebody that you respect, like I did my grandfather, and then obviously your dad was you for a minute, and he wrote
Yeah.
that letter. He wrote that letter to his dad. I mean, what an incredible story.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah, so let's see here. I took a couple notes while we're going. I can relate to the never going to be like them thought process as a young kid. I'm never going to be like my mom. It was flipped for me. My mom was the bad egg, the one that needs help, still does to this day. As far as I know, I don't talk to her very often, but it was my dad actually that, come to find out, he was the one that was taking the brunt of everything, and he was the villain on my story, for a long time, because I was just going by what she was told. But every time that mom wanted to get help or it seemed like she was changing, I bit right in, and it was quite the roller coaster. So I think family dynamics is an important thing to talk about, because you can get wrapped up in these things and like, I'm just doomed because this is what my family did, or you can be like, well, like for me, knowing that my great grandfather, who had not only went to war, got shrapnel in the neck and shot in the leg, he not only did he survive that, but he also got help with his alcoholism, and that to me was such an uplifting thing.
Yeah, that's huge. I have a son. I have a son. He's in his mid 30s now, and I've been sober the entire time he's been on the planet, and many years before he was born. But genetically, he's still at a predisposition, and he ended up uh, with a very severe alcohol addiction. He's in recovery today. By the grace of God, he's doing well, and I mean, he struggles with a seizure disorder, and he struggles with, obviously, you know, alcoholism, but he's doing well today. So I do think there's a predisposition genetically to our kids, and that letter was a slap in the face, to realize I didn't know, that grandpa struggled. I didn't know. I was just figuring out my dad struggled, and then for me to have it, and then now for my son to have it. It's,
Well, uh, if I was to say that I wasn't terrified for my twin boys, given the long history of my family, that would be a lie, because I am terrified. But the only thing that I can do about it, because I can't predict the future, is to continue talking and try to give out, that acceptance vibe, that whatever is on their mind, if dad's willing to go out and get online and be vulnerable and talk about this stuff, I hope that they're willing to do that with me or somebody else.
right.
Because I don't know what, I mean, at least if they're willing to talk to somebody. Yeah, I think that's.
Can I talk about one of the interventions that my parents did?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I had moved out. My dad said, "You live here drug free or move out." I moved out to a major drug pusher's house, and he was gone to Arizona to pick up more product, and I was to watch his house. Now, think about this. I'm like 15, just about turned 16. I don't brush my teeth. I can't, my hair's really long. If it gets a knot in, I just cut it out. I mean, I'm really not well kept, and I'm not taking care of myself. I can't hold food down, and now I'm going to take care of this guy's house. He's got pets. He says to me, he says, "Don't have any people over." I was like, "Hey, we won't want anybody to know where you live." He's like, "Right." I said, and he says, "Don't be driving my car." I said, "Hey, I don't even have my license yet." First day he was gone, I had a party with 65 people at his house. Grease fire in the stove. Dog and cat got out under the fence, didn't come back. The neighbor came over. He says, "I called down to Arizona, told him what you did to what you're doing to his place." Because I had asked everybody to leave. They thought I was joking, so I left. I took his car. And when I left, I took his car to 6th and Telegraph Shell. We used to hang out there, and I was going to show off and do a donut. And then when I did the donut, I hit one of those yellow posts that protects the gas pumps, put a big dent in his car.
Ooh.
So I asked the neighbor, I said, "You didn't tell him about the car, did you?" He goes, "You smashed his car. He's going to kill you." So sure enough, my buddy bondos the car. I got to pick him up from the airport. And when he comes back, I'm in high school. And he's like, and I said to my parents when he was coming back, I said, "Can I move back in?" And they said, "Are you using drugs?" I said, "No." Number one symptom, denial. And you got to be in by midnight. I said, "Yeah, no problem." Okay, 2 conditions: no drugs and been by midnight. The guy whose house I damaged, and the grease fire and the car, he calls on the line, the high school line, says, "They got me out of classes. He got an emergency phone call." It's him. He's like, "Stay there." He said, "Grease fire, couch is broke, TV's broke, can't find my dog and cat. Bondo on my car. Stay there. I'm coming to get you." Well, I was chemically dependent, but I wasn't stupid.
Sure.
I took off, and he put me on the run for a long time, a long, long time. And so as I'm on the run, I moved back in, and I had missed a couple curfews, and then I came in one Thursday night, but the rest of the world is Friday morning. It was about 4 in the morning, and my bags are packed, and I'm like, "What do you?" My mom and dad are up, and I said, "What are you doing? Have me committed?" And my mom puts her hands on my shoulders, and she says, "No, we just want you to go with us this one weekend." I knock her hands down. I'm like, nobody touches me. I said, I can't be going with you. I'm too busy. And I turned around and bumped into my dad, who had trimmed down to about 250. And I'm like, Dad, I'm just putting these bags in the trunk. He's like, you better be. So I put the bags in the trunk. They come out. It's like, 5 in the morning, 5:30. And I said, where are we going? They give me the silent treatment. They don't say nothing. And we're driving and I see the Ambassador Bridge. I said, oh, we're going to Canada, eh? They're like, nothing. They don't even laugh. And then the custom agent comes out. And by this time I'm kind of fatigued, right? I'm like, I hadn't been to bed in a couple of days. And the custom agent comes out and he says, citizenship. And my mom and dad said, United States. And then they looked at me and they turned around and looked at me. And the guy goes, citizenship. I said, don't bother me, man. I'm with them. I thought that meant United States. No, it didn't mean United States. He dives into the back seat with me. It's the first time I ever met anybody meaner than me. He's like breathing fire. He's like, I didn't ask you who you're with. I asked you where you're born. And my parents are giving me hints. USA, USA, just say USA. I'm like this. I was like, no. I said, no one's going to talk to me that way. I said, let me out. So my mom lets me out of her side. I'm getting ready to fight the border agent. Like, and my dad jumps out and I'm thinking, you know what? I'm getting out of line. I'm just going to walk back towards Detroit. So I'm start walking towards Detroit. And my dad says to the custom agent, he goes, my kid's chemically dependent. We're going over to Niagara Falls to an AA convention. He really needs some help. Do you think you could let him go? And the guy goes, boy, he sure does need some help. And they let me go.
Wow.
And so I got this 4-hour lecture how to treat custom agents. It took me 4 hours to learn USA. That's how bad my comprehension was. Today, I'm very good at it, man. As I pull up,
Sure.
man, I know the whole deal. That's about it, man. I just, hey, congratulations on the podcast, man. Keep doing your thing. Anything I can do, let me know.
Yeah, I appreciate you, man. And what a compelling story that you shared today. And I'm so glad that you're out there, even in my home state, out there spreading the good word of, hope, right? Because, I mean, we don't have much of that in the beginning.
I am a hope addict. I love hope, and I love instilling hope in others, man.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, man. I will have to do this again. I'd love to hear more. Clearly, you can tell you've done some speaking because everything flowed very well.
We can do another one on parenting and get you armed for for the stuff you're going to be called into.
Yeah. We'll definitely touch base on that for sure.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Tom. Everybody, thanks for listening.
Yeah, appreciate you, man.
Yeah, the link will be up soon. Tom, take care, and look for this coming out soon, guys.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye.